with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's Saturday night, and this is Saturday 5. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albie Abercorner, Stephanie Tecci, Ben Leo and Benjamin Butterworth. Tonight on the show...
Is it ever OK to misgender a trans person?
And should black actresses play the part of Juliet in Romeo and Juliet?
Sacre Bleu! Never mind Buckingham Palace, defend your border, France!
Why did the Tories go soft on William Wragg's naughty pictures?
And we must wake up to the threat of Iranian terrorists.
Ooh, it's 6 p.m, and this is the Saturday 5. Welcome to the Saturday 5. Now, Storm Kathleen is about to hit the United Kingdom, so why not settle down for us two for 2 hours of lively debate? Mind you, it can get quite stormy in here because, of course, I'm joined by one of the few Tories yet to be caught in a sexting scandal, Albie Abercorner.
There's still time.
The night is young. The wokest non-gender-aligned person in Britain, Benjamin Butterworth, he wishes he could get caught in a sexting scandal because he'd like the publicity. And Ben Leo, who has no time for sexting because he's too busy presenting 8 GB News shows a day. We also have the brilliant showbiz journalist Stephanie Tecci to keep things in order. Now, we've got 5 lively debates lined up for the first hour. We want your thoughts on all of them, of course, as usual. And don't forget, you can ask us whatever you like in Ask the 5. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com. But before the bad blood and petty squabbling begins, it's your Saturday night news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you. The top stories this hour. Storm Kathleen has brought strong winds and a provisional highest temperature of the year so far after recording of 20.9 degrees Celsius in Suffolk. Dozens of flights have been cancelled, though, due to Storm Kathleen, with gusts of up to 70 miles per hour in Northern Ireland and the west of Britain. Over 140 flights have been called off so far. A yellow weather warning for wind is in effect until 10 o'clock tonight and covers Cornwall, much of Wales, parts of Lancashire and Cumbria, and up into central Scotland. Meanwhile, 2 planes on the runway at Heathrow Airport have collided, causing damage to their wings. Footage shows a Virgin Atlantic plane's wing touching a British Airways aircraft, surrounded by emergency services. The Virgin Boeing 787-9 plane had completed a flight and was being towed to a different part of the airfield. It's understood, though, that there were no passengers on board at the time of the incident. Rail passengers have been facing fresh travel disruption today as train drivers continue their walkout in a pay dispute. Members of ASLEV at 6 companies have been walking out, leaving some areas with no services all day. Chiltern, TransPennine Express and Northern have not been running any trains, and there'll be a reduced service on Great Western, LNER and Heathrow Express. Engineering work means there have been no trains between London Paddington and Reading. The torso found at a nature reserve in Salford belonged to a man aged older than 40. A murder investigation was launched by Greater Manchester Police after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Wetlands. The victim's believed to have been dead for a matter of days. DNA tests are ongoing to identify the man. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has been detained by Dutch police during a demonstration in The Hague. Thunberg was put in a large bus by officers along with other protesters who tried to block a major highway into the administrative capital of the Netherlands. The 21-year-old activist was protesting against the Dutch government's fossil fuel subsidies. A Conservative MP says he was the first whistleblower to alert police to the parliamentary honey trap sexting scandal. Bosworth MP Dr Luke Evans says he was the victim of cyber flashing as the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into unsolicited messages with Leicestershire Police. On Thursday, Tory MP William Wragg told The Times he'd sent intimate pictures of himself to someone on a gay dating app and was then manipulated into providing colleagues' phone numbers. So far, around a dozen MPs, staff and journalists are known to have been targeted.
The first set of messages I got was on a day I was with my wife, and I got a one-time open photo on WhatsApp of an explicit image of a naked lady. As soon as I got these, the next day I reported it to the police, the authorities and the chief whip. 10 days later, I got another set of messages. This time, however, I was sat with my team in the constituency office, so we were able to record the conversation and catch photos and videos of the messages coming through, including another explicit female image. I've put my name up to say, well, I hope others come forward. I'm just pleased I blew the whistle, reported it to the authorities, and it's now being looked into.
Nearly £17 million worth of drugs has been seized by the Royal Navy after it intercepted smuggling speedboats in the Caribbean Sea. Across 2 operations, HMS Trent seized 200 kg of cocaine following a port visit to the island of Martinique. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says it shows the Navy's commitment to disrupt and dismantle drug traffickers. And today marks the 50th anniversary of ABBA's famous win at the Eurovision Song Contest, which elevated the Swedish pop group to international fame. Their fans gathered today at London's Waterloo station to pay tribute by singing the song that won them the contest. ABBA won the European music competition with their smash hit Waterloo in 1974. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now let's get back to the Saturday at 5.
It's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday Five. I'm Darren Grimes and I want you all to settle down, forget the cares of the world and enjoy 2 hours of topical discussion. We're going to crack on with tonight's first debate. Who's going to kick us off?
Me, please, Darren. I will commence proceedings.
Right, since you asked so nicely.
Thank you, Darren. It's the biggest news story of the week, wasn't it? It's quite a quiet news week, but the biggest one was William Wragg, the Tory MP, who got caught out sending explicit messages and pictures to a random number. So not only did this MP compromise himself, we all know what happened, he handed over the numbers of other parliamentary staffers and MPs. I think it's an absolute disgrace, but the likes of Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, said that William Wragg was courageous for coming forward and explaining his massive gaffe and that he'd been scared and he was a victim. So my question is to everybody here, don't MPs deserve to feel the consequences of their actions anymore? Not only should he have been sacked or resigned for sending a random phone number naughty pictures, but also, additionally, he compromised everyone else in the process.
But I think, Ben, what people might say is that he is standing down at the next general election. Yes. He's already pre-announced that. Now, what might normally happen in this circumstances, an MP might say, well, I won't stand for election at the next election, rather than just resign straight away. Because if you're thinking about it just in a purely selfish way, if he resigns straight away, then he loses his income, doesn't he?
Well, so he should. He's an MP. As I said, two isolated incidents here, by the way. So not only did he compromise himself, that, as far as I'm concerned, on an individual basis, is worthy of a sacking or a resignation, combined with the fact he stitched up all his colleagues as well, and, may I add, put the safety and security of the nation at risk.
He could lose the whip. I think he could lose the whip.
You know, he is stepping down, so we know it's going to be a wrap for him. But I am thinking about his mental health here, Ben. Like, look, he's already the laughing stock. In the world of politics, he's been splattered on the front pages of the newspapers. Isn't that enough for him? Isn't that enough shame? Isn't that enough disgrace for him here? You have to think, the man has been forced to expose what he's been doing in his personal life. He's probably learnt a lesson now, so let's turn that other cheek.
That's the thing, it's not just, oh, it's his personal life, leave people's private lives be. This guy is a leader of the country. He's voted by his constituents and he has a duty. And I've been learnt this week that MPs go through training for this kind of thing, blackmail, what they call it, honeypot traps. They go through training, so they're briefed on this. And for me, sending, I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but I don't send those kind of pictures to anyone.
Well, you are married, so...
Yeah. Or even to my wife.
It's different when you're single.
I'm very vanilla. But
I think we know that Will Wragg had several months off from being an MP not long ago because he had a breakdown. So we know that he's had very poor mental health, and he had been open about that. I strongly suspect that explains why the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have basically decided to lay off, as have the other parties, because they know that this person is particularly fragile. And while in normal circumstances I would think, yeah, you should lose the whip, it should be seriously dealt with, this is someone who is clearly in a poor state already, and so what would you actually achieve? I think a level of compassion goes a long way, given he's leaving Parliament anyway.
I think, actually, I'm going to be the nasty little cow on the panel. I think he had this sort of stance of moral indignation at Boris Johnson's government. He was giving it all the, oh, Boris Johnson needs to go, he's a disgrace, blah, blah, blah.
But that's politics.
Pot, kettle, black.
But that's politics, though.
Well, exactly, it's politics.
He was blaming Boris about politics. This is about his personal life.
No. This was about defending Chris Pincher, who Pincher by name, Pincher by nature.
And by the way, is there an argument or a debate to be had about hiding behind mental health? I'm not saying he's lying about his situation, but in the example of Hugh Edwards, for example, at the BBC, they're still paying his $430k a year salary.
That's a legal requirement.
Out of licence fee payer cash. I know, but there's an argument there that licence fee payers should have more knowledge, or the BBC and Hugh Edwards should be more transparent about his situation. I don't think
that's a very different question.
Mental health.
But look, I would just say, so first of all, I think the reason that parties and the Tories and the other parties have laid off is because they know this particular person is fragile. But one of the most serious things, there are two really serious things, I think. One is the fact that after voluntarily sending explicit photos, that as soon as that person tried to blackmail him, he immediately caved in. That I find very worrying about his character and, principles to be so easily overtaken. That suggests that, is he somebody of character to be an MP in the first place? The other point I'd make is that he passed on numbers not just of other MPs, which is a security risk, but of staffers who are obviously his juniors. And so I think in any other workplace, if a TV presenter had sent the producer's number in that context, you'd be sacked on the spot, right? Because that is such an abuse of power to pass on a junior person's details and put them at risk.
But it's probably multiple data protection breaches and all sorts of stuff.
I can imagine.
Then we come back to that point about MPs, because, of course, MPs are elected by their constituents, and really, then it's up to the constituents to decide at the ballot box whether or not they still want that MP, and this MP is already standing down.
All right, let's move on then. Who have we got next?
We've got me, Darren. So I got myself into a little bit of hot water earlier on this week with my favourite childhood author, J.K. Rowling. I sent a tweet in response to her misgendering a transgender model called Munro Bergdorf, and this is what I said in the tweet. Like most Brits, I'm sympathetic to J.K. Rowling's views on biological sex and the need for single-sex provisions, but I suspect most Brits, like me, would find calling a trans woman who looks like Munro Bergdorf, him, to be obtuse and mean-spirited. You're seeing some images of the tweet there. J.K. fired back, saying, so if trans-identified men are pretty enough, as judged by you, a man, women ought to agree that they're women. Femaleness has no relation whatsoever to how well an individual man or woman performs femininity to male standards. This is the very definition of misogyny. So I went out earlier on today to see what the public think about this, because I seem to think that the public are on my side, but this is what they said earlier on. What do you think of people who deliberately misgender trans people?
I think it's quite ridiculous. We all choose our identities and we should respect one another and go by what everyone feels for themselves.
So I will call her the way she wants me to, the way she wants to be called. So if she's transgender, so it means that she wants to be she, so I will call her she.
Sorry, let me start again. I got this wrong.
That's what I like you.
Don't worry.
Because you are yourself confused.
Yeah, it's not very nice, is it? It's their choice which pronoun they want to use, and I don't think that's it's not great, basically.
She, her. And if this person told you that they were transgender, would you still call them she, her?
Well, I'd ask them what they'd want to be called, actually.
Spot on.
And then go from there, rather than assume.
Right, now go and try that in Hartlepool.
But that's not the point, Ben Leo. Every single member of the public that I went up to said they would be quite happy to call Munro Bergdorf she, her, which is what my prediction was to begin with. And I think I could do this vox pop in Hartlepool or in Oldham, which is where my mother's family are from, and I think we'd get similar results.
Albie, it doesn't mean that everybody has to think that way, because J.K. Rowling, it's like psychological warfare here, because trans women, yes, they are trans women, but they are not biological women.
They're not.
And we shouldn't be forced into thinking, yes, they are biological women, but they deserve the respect. If they want to be known as trans women, give them the respect. J.K. Rowling shouldn't be terrorising anyone online.
OK, so they should be given the respect of being called by whatever pronouns they want.
Yeah.
But people shouldn't have the respect of deciding how to dictate their own language.
But it's the same how someone wants you to treat them. So if you meet a trans woman and she wants to be called she, you cannot be telling him you're a he.
So I'm forced to abide by their morals. As a matter of
respect.
Let's have a look at something very quickly, because I want to just get up an extract from J.K. Rowling's initial blog post on trans rights that got her into this mess in the first place, where actually she herself refers to a trans woman as she. I happen to know a self-described transsexual woman who's older than I am and wonderful. Although she's open about her past as a gay man, I've always found it hard to think of her as anything other than a woman. So, in the past, J.K. Rowling has been quite happy to refer to trans women as she, her, and call them women, but not now. Do you not think that's a bit weird that she's got her position as hardened, Darren?
Yeah, it has hardened, but I think it's hardened because actually they've been given an inch and they've tried to take a mile.
That's exactly it.
I think actually the demands for these kinds of things, the bullying, frankly, to say to women that actually you have to accept this because this is progress.
Yeah.
This is absolutely where we need to be as a society. But actually, if sex doesn't exist, then access to single-sex spaces and protections around them, they don't exist either.
Respectfully.
Homosexuality doesn't exist.
Respectfully, Darren, I am not talking about single-sex spaces. I'm not talking about biological sex. In fact, I make that quite clear in the tweet to J.K. Rowling. I'm just referring to gendering a trans woman.
But Darren is explaining generally as a wider
it's
argument.
very much linked to what you've said. If biological sex doesn't exist...
I didn't know. No one's saying that. I'm not saying that.
You're calling her a she.
I'm not.
She's not a she.
I'm saying out of courtesy, I would call a trans woman, who I know is a biological male, I'm not an idiot, I would call a trans woman she, out of courtesy.
Therefore, you are accepting that single-sex spaces are accessed by men.
No, I'm not, because I'm not talking about any of that. I'm not talking about it.
They are linked. You cannot separate the two.
Darren, I have been very clear.
You have been very clear that you are being inconsistent.
No, you are being very clear that you're not listening to what I'm saying. Benjamin Butterworth, I'd be interested to hear your opinion on this.
Well, I'm glad someone would be. Look, I think there's a difference between what should be in law. So should it be a criminal offence to say otherwise? No, that's probably not worth it. But is it basic manners and respect to another human being? Yes, it is. Look, these people, there'll be plenty of trans people going about their daily lives for whom everyone around will not figure out that they're transgender. Yeah. So how does that work? You know, if you saw Munro Bergdorf in the street, for example, you'd be very unlikely to think that that person was trans. You'd just assume they were a woman, right? And so that is just saying what you see. You get lots of people for whom they have one name on their birth certificate, but they go by a totally different name. By your argument, you'd be saying that you shouldn't call them the name that they've chosen to go by in life because that's not on their birth certificate. I think this is a matter of respect. And I would also point out that if someone is saying they're a woman or a man for that matter, whichever direction they go in, and you're insisting on calling them what they're not, I think, you know, that quite clearly can become bullying because all you're doing is making life hard for them on something that's incredibly minor for you.
Ben, you cannot be looking at someone like Munro Bergdorf and think, that's a man. Would you call her a man?
Sorry, is looks the barometer of a woman these days?
I think...
women are confined...
No.
But the point is, you would assume it is a woman.
No, I think he looks like a bloke.
As a man, you cannot say that is a man.
Let me see a picture again. Let me see a picture.
I mean, she's literally a Vogue model.
Well, yeah, because of the fact that they are trans, right?
Well, no, actually, because in the 1960s, one of the first...
Up of Munro again.
One of the first...
Look,
one of the first people...
Most men will be none the wiser...
Several pictures, though. That is a heavily airbrushed picture. I've seen several pictures where
this is such a shallow conversation. Does this person look like a woman or a man? It's so inane. It's so inane.
Well, how do you judge... Ben, how do you judge whether or not someone looks like a man or a woman if not looking at them?
Yeah, but fine. She looks like a good trans woman. She looks better than most trans, but that's not the point. We're talking about trans people infringing on women's sports. We're talking about trans people.
That's not what I'm talking about.
It's all part of the same argument, Alvin.
No, it's not. Because
you're saying
agree
call
with
people
you.
by the pronouns that they want to be called. And I'm saying stop coming after kids, stop infringing on the integrity of women's sports, and stop forcing your beliefs, 0.3% of the population, on the majority of the nation.
And you can think all of that at the same time as calling trans women she and her, because I do. But I don't understand why you find it so difficult to have that level of nuance.
If you're so tolerant, Albie, and you, Steph, and you, Benjamin, you're so tolerant and you're such virtuous people, let people who want to call people whatever pronouns they want, and those who don't want to abide by the nonsense, respect them as well.
It's about respect.
Or are you not tolerant?
I'm the only woman on this panel, and I have to say, look, I
didn't want to assume.
Oh, sorry, darling. I can respect transgender women how they want to be themselves, but my problem is when they try to diminish what biological women are and what our rights are. That's my big problem.
That's what Albie's doing, saying, doesn't this look like a woman? What, you're just diluting it. Women are amazing, powerful creatures. They give birth. They are, you know, beautiful creatures.
Well, not all women.
And you're diluting women to does this person look like a woman because she's got fake breasts and plump lips?
It is polite to call a trans woman she or her out of courtesy.
And it's also...
Stop making things up.
Benjamin said it was
You've got a vivid
you were
imagination.
like the dog from the church.
That's not what I said. That's what Ben said.
It would be, but imagine if in your office you have, for example, a trans woman, and every day their boss comes in and calls them a man. That would clearly be an abusive situation. They're not asking for that. They're not asking for anything special. They're just trying to do their job.
Yeah, that's bullying, and a teacher was sacked for that recently.
But that's what you're defending.
No,
you're defending that when...
No, I'm not.
Oh, also, these trans people, they don't want this argument. They just want to get on with their lives and have basic respect.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense. These people want attention like you wouldn't believe. They go on about it all the time.
You know,
they want more and more.
No, you
and
go
more.
on
They
about
are the
it all
bullies.
the
They
time.
are the bullies.
If
and you are on the side of the bullies and you're inconsistent and all the rest.
What a load of old rubbish.
Anyway, we're going to have to move on. Still to come tonight, it's a royal farce as the French military are handed the keys to Buckingham Palace. I'm going to be asking why you're not at the border. And we'll ask whether black women should be able to take the lead in Romeo and Juliet. But next, are the Iranian regime targeting dissidents on the streets of Britain with impunity? And what can be done to actually crack down and get serious here? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
I believe our farmers can compete globally. If I visit some Somerset farmers, they are extremely efficient and highly competitive and innovative, and we need to encourage the best.
And it's a high-end product.
It's a high-end product.
Which was one of the points that was being made earlier.
And that we have to focus on what we are good at. And what our protectionism does at the moment is protects Irish beef farmers, French beef farmers and Dutch beef farmers, as opposed to buying cheaper beef from Australia. I have no desire to protect EU farms.
The problem is that we live in the Northern Hemisphere and we have a very difficult climate. So actually, and we know this because when the Corn Laws were repealed in 1846, we know darned well what happened to agriculture.
It led to cheap bread. It made the society much better off.
This has been an argument going on for 150 years.
It's simply wrong. British agriculture didn't collapse at that point. There was a glut in the market 30 years later, which comes much after the Corn Laws.
Well, obviously, things were much slower in those days. It took a long time for that to impact.
Actually, do you know what? The principles of that debate and this debate are not dissimilar.
No, that's
They're
right.
not dissimilar.
It's very, very... I always go on about the Corn Laws. It's my favourite subject.
No. And it was a wonderful upwelling and grassroots campaign and all the rest of it. But whether we have a Conservative or a Labour government, do you actually think that a Labour government will be any closer or more connected to your community than this Conservative one?
The Labour government, it's in their interest to make sure that Britain has got food. And with the way the world is right now, we're in a very fragile situation, which is why we need food security. And every farmer I know talks about food security because we understand how much less food is being
We better have a look at net zero commitments too, but another time.
Net zero commitments it'll be wind farms.
Enough. We can argue all night about this.
Let's do it. I'm up for arguing all night.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. As always, thanks very much for your emails about tonight's topics coming in thick and fast. Trish said Wragg should go. He threw colleagues under a bus to save his own skin from blackmail, which is worse than sending pictures of his private parts. Well,
why did you say it like that?
Should I? The reviews are in for Albie's Vox Pops, and I'm afraid they're not favourable. Barbara says, Albie, you've made a schoolboy error of treating pretty females differently and then asking the public, the dim public, J.K. Rowling is right about you. Sorry.
I've always thought Albie has a thing for pretty females. That's
PJ Duncan says, hand-picked members of the public. For it to be valid, the selection should have been random. Shame on you for not doing a survey properly. Shame.
I can tell you the selection was definitely random.
Right, now it's time for our next debate. Who's going next?
It's me next, and it's a pretty... yeah, don't worry, it's not a woke topic this week, actually. It's a really serious one. So, only a week ago, a presenter at Iran International, an Iranian TV station based in London, was stabbed on a residential street by 3 men who then, according to reports from the Metropolitan Police, fled the country and are said to be back in Iran. Now, this is far from the first time that we have seen examples of threats from Iran's Revolutionary Guard on Britain's streets. This time last year, I spent several months investigating the scale of it and found 15 assassination attempts on British soil related to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. This is in a whole other scale to what we've had from Russia, and yet it gets so little attention. Well, the man that was stabbed a week ago, Poria Zarati, he went back to work just days after being hospitalised from the attack to show that those terrorists won't win, those alleged terrorists won't win. But what really worries me is that you've got this scale of threat where someone has been stabbed and has seemingly got away with it, where other people have had threats to assassinate, which is known to MI5, and they've said it on record. And yet we've not said they're a terrorist organisation.
Iran International used to be... They had a studio in Chiswick, actually in the same complex I go to the gym. And when these threats first started coming, they had to close down the whole of Chiswick Business Park, basically put it on security lockdown. They had all of these armed police officers there, proper, serious stuff. This is in Chiswick, you know, suburban West London. It was all quite scary for us. But then I was listened to the broadcaster that this happened to, talking about what had happened to him, and I realised I put 2 and 2 together. And you just think, this isn't actually something which just affects Iran International TV. This affects British people in communities across the country. Didn't this happen in Wimbledon or something? This is happening all across the country.
And this TV station, Iran International, had to leave Britain for Washington, D.C. for about a year because the Met Police said, we can't keep those journalists safe. Now, the idea that you've got a foreign power being so effective in their intimidation that journalists have to leave the country is just unbelievable.
It's managed to slip underneath the radar, unfortunately. But you just think, as a society, Ben, we've got so much as a country that we're dealing with in terms of terrorist attacks from left, right and centre. I don't think we have enough resources to now be looking at Iran and their threats.
And actually, I find you a bit of a hypocrite, again, week on week, no surprise, because you're happy to have uncontrolled mass migration in this country, fighting-age male men, thousands of them, crossing the channel, throwing their passports and mobile phones into the channel and coming here en masse, and yet you don't raise any security concerns about that. But as soon as an Iranian journalist attacked, you get on your hind legs and cry about it.
I think it's high horse, Ben, but... look, the fact is...
Hind legs.
Most
H-I-N-D.
Most Iranians that have moved to this country have done so because they disagree with the Revolutionary Guard that runs Iran. So most Iranians do not share this outlook.
Right, so do you think channel arrivals from God knows where also share our culture and values?
Well, that's up to them to illustrate in order to get, citizenship status.
But what I would say, though, Benjamin, is that there is evidence of Iranian schools, for example, being set up in London that have ideological elements infiltrating inside of them. We've seen from many Jewish newspapers in this country that actually there's a threat to inculcating young minds in this very country against Jews, for example, and they're people that have come over here and are setting up these schools abroad. So that would be a sign of really quite sinister Iranian elements entering the United Kingdom, would it not?
There is one school that's accused of that, and it's a private school, and it's where all the elite Iranians from the regime send their kids. And it's quite shocking that it's allowed to exist. But look, let me ask you this, Darren.
Yeah.
So the government declines to prescribe them. So unlike Hamas, for example, which is a terrorist organisation, they refuse to do this. Why do you think they're being so weak when you've literally got a man who was stabbed trying to do his job as a news presenter, just days ago?
I think because they are slightly concerned about what that would mean as far as escalation and threat to this country is, but I don't think we should be cowed and hide in terror, in fear of terror like that, because then the terrorists win. I think Iran, we are facing an axis of evil in the world, not in this country. But this country, as a consequence of an unsafe world, an axis of evil being Russia, Iran and China. And Iran, I think we can't actually underplay the threat that they pose. I'm really worried about a sort of Salisbury-style chemical attack in this country of the kind that Russia perpetrated in Salisbury by Iran to actually combat and get to people here that they don't like. But dare I say it, Benjamin, that's why I'm 100% behind Israel, because I think by the time Israel fall, Iran won't stop there. And it is Iran perpetrating much of this.
And, of course, fascinatingly, most Iranians aren't Muslim. Just because it's run by extreme Muslims, most Iranians aren't even believers in Islam.
What's your solution? Attack Iran?
No, my solution is to prescribe them, as Benjamin's
But just to give you another example of how shocking it is, I spoke to a man who lives in central London and his father is under house arrest in Iran and he speaks out criticising that government. They tried to abduct him in central London in the middle of the day. They tried to drag him into the back of a van and he managed to escape. And they reported that to the police and the police didn't follow it up. There was another example where I spoke to a man who's a prominent in the Jewish community, and he's fairly old, and he and his wife were told that their grandkids could be abducted when they're walking because they're being followed by Iranian terrorists. All of this is known to police, and there are no prosecutions because they want to take the so-called diplomatic route.
How have these people that you've spoken to, these sources, how are they doing now? How are they getting on with their lives? How have they responded to this threat?
Well, all of them have said it turned their lives upside down.
Naturally, yeah.
But what I find incredible is that these are things that if any of us behave like this, you'd be getting 20 years in prison.
Yeah.
And yet, as a country, we don't, because we are intimidated by Iran. And I think that's a hiding to nothing.
All right, folks, let us know your views at home. Still ahead, though, we will ask whether black women should be able to take the lead in Romeo and Juliet. But next, just when we thought it couldn't get more ridiculous, frankly, the French soldiers have been given the all-clear to guard Buckingham Palace. Over most of the course of history, they would likely, invade it. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can the Church of England not spend their money as they wish?
The Church of England can do amazing things for this country and for the world, and I'm not sure why it's chosen to focus on this specific issue. One of the causes that I've always thought the Church was very good at were things called almshouses, which were basically houses that would be built on church estates for the needy. Not only did they want to spend £100 million on this fund, that they wanted to spend £1 billion on reparations as well. But why not spend 100 million or £1 billion on a new generation of almshouses, as opposed to just helping one group of people, black British people? Why not just help all people in need?
Alex?
Well, I just don't understand what the Church of England is trying to do. It's on its deathbed.
Congregations have reduced. I mean, deathbed is maybe a little bit...
Look, if we look over 20 years, it's dramatically lower than it used to be. And a lot of criticism from actual Christians come from the values that the Church of England are now propagating. And Justin Welby has a lot to answer for because, you know, not only are we seeing in the news there's mass conversion of illegal immigrants to a gay mass system in the UK, but now we're seeing them spending money, and as Albie actually pointed out correctly, in a way that doesn't really benefit broader society. It benefits a very small group of people. So I just don't know where it's going to end. This committee has also said 1 million's not enough. It's 100 million, sorry.
Church commissioners are now hoping for a target of 1 billion.
I mean, it's woke nonsense, isn't it?
You could make the argument that this is charity. Justin Welby's job is to be a virtue signaller, is it not?
Should charity discriminate? I mean, that's what he's saying. We're only going to give this to people from a specific skin colour or background. I don't think that's very Christian of them.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. You'll be pleased to know we're all still alive and we're all very much enjoying your emails. My namesake, Darren, oh, well, you had a good mother. She says, J.K. Rowling is braver than the political and media class put together. She could have happily, with her multi-millions, enjoyed Hollywood's loving gaze. She's decided women's rights as a survivor of domestic violence are more important. And actually, Darren, I know a certain Darren that could have written that exactly the same. And Bev said, hello, Bev Turner. Ben Leo is the only one talking any sense tonight. Get out. Albie, why did you just show the public the nice-looking man? Why not have 2 photos of men dressed as women? Right.
Don't worry, Darren. I'll come back to it later.
Now, it's time for our next discussion. Well, actually, I think I'm taking this one. I'm going to kick us off for the first time in history, actually. This is a unique tour de force. French troops will guard Buckingham Palace. It's a drill approved by King Charles III to mark 120 years of Anglo-French relations established by the Entente Cordiale of 1904. Ooh. The changing of the guard ceremony on Monday will feature 32 French soldiers from the Republican Guard, and the French something
Don't do that.
will participate in the ceremony, but they won't replace British forces in their traditional role of guarding the king. Now, folks, all I would say to this is I think President Macron, before allowing his forces to defend Buckingham Palace, which I think we're doing a pretty good job at, could actually consider using his troops to defend Calais and what's going on there and the invasion that takes place over that border every 2 seconds instead of this nonsense on Buckingham
Palace. First of all, they can teach you how to say gendarmerie. That's what you were tripping up over there when you were...
Common as muck you are.
That's what a 20 grand a year school gets.
Oh, can't we just leave the migrant situation for just one day? Let it just be a nice day of the Brits and the French coming together. Come on. We've got a nice relationship with them. Leave the migrants just for one day.
We've
just
given
one
them
day,
over £500 million to sort out this problem.
Yeah.
And yet now they're being like, oh, let's have some fancy displays at Buckingham Palace.
Yes,
aren't we
not?
nice? Aren't we generous?
Why not?
Aren't we getting on very well? Well,
I think that's
not when
nice.
you're allowing these criminals to enter our country.
Do you know what happened before the Entente Cordiale? Do you know what the relationship was like between Britain and France?
As in war?
Yes.
Yes, a war that we won.
The point that I'm making is, what the Entente Cordiale is and what this is a representation of is good relations between Britain and France for 120 years.
But why fake it?
And thank goodness we're not at war with our closest... Hold on, let me make the point. Thank goodness we're not at war with our closest neighbour, because we only had to look to Israel and Gaza to see what that looks like.
Oh, that's same.
I care more about our relationship with America than I do any European country.
Well, and I tell you what, I think actually maybe there would be some merit to retaking Calais.
What? Are you advocating that we invade France?
I absolutely am. Short, small wall, and we retake Calais and have control of our borders.
Albie, no, I get your point, you know, let's save our relations with France, but our relations are at an all-time low. France have treated the UK despicably since we voted to leave the European Union. As Darren said, we pay them, what is it, £500 million a year?
£500 million.
All the border guards do off Calais and Dunkirk is they, as the Sun newspaper brilliantly exposed a couple of months ago, they're paid all this money to stop dinghies getting into the water. Instead, they're off partying down the local working men's club and sinking shots. I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. Macron, the way he's spoken about the country in recent years is also a disgrace. And there is no relationship there. Until France stopped these boats and these fighting-age males, tens of thousands of them each year, from coming into Britain, there is no relationship.
And we also fell out with them over the nuclear subs, remember, because we're building...
The AUKUS deal.
For Australia. And the French got very sniffy about that, so maybe that we're just doing this to try and look nice.
Europeans hate Britain.
What was it that your mate Liz Truss said about the French during her leadership contest?
I don't know. What did she
didn't know if they were friend or foe.
Well,
I mean, how can you say that to our closest neighbour?
They are not our closest ally.
I said neighbour. They are our closest.
They are. They're not,
quite
actually.
literally.
They're not.
Well, I've had awful neighbours before.
No, the Channel is a shorter stretch of water
21 miles.
than the Irish Sea.
Not a part of the United Kingdom is attached to Ireland, Albie.
You know what I mean,
I
Darren.
don't, actually.
No one likes a smarty.
Anyway, come on, we're going to get Mr. France himself. You like a good old pastry and a bit of Chanel.
Well, I mean, look, I am a great admirer of President Macron. He is exactly my politics.
I didn't know what you were going to say there.
Tony Blair, Hillary Clinton and Emmanuel Macron are people that I think should run the world forever.
Centrist.
But what I would say...
At least you said the quiet part out loud.
...is that you are forgetting the way he... You know, this is about Buckingham Palace. When the late Queen died, I was incredibly moved when President Macron, in the centre of Paris, sang God Save the Queen, which I thought was incredibly powerful. The first state visit was to France.
Oh, OK, he's still not stopping the boats.
He gave a speech to camera after the Queen's death where he clearly understood on a profound level the value and longevity of Her late Majesty and of the British royal family in a way that I didn't think any other world leader put it so well.
About the country,
I think he has a serious respect for our royal family and that institution in Britain. And that is what this is about, because this is about protecting Buckingham Palace. And I think he's treated our royals with a lot of respect.
It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. Every country is out of their depth in trying to stop the boats and stop migrants.
Stopping the boats is the #1 priority of most straight, common-sense thinking Brits in this country. Our culture, our health, our safety...
Well, the boats aren't going down the Mall, so you're all right.
All these people coming across undocumented into Britain.
So do you think it would be easier to stop the boats with a good or a bad relationship with France?
Do you think it's impossible to patrol properly the beaches of France?
Do you think it would be easier to stop the boats with a good or a bad relationship with France?
I'll answer that question, Albie, because you're saying our relationship right now has never been stronger.
I didn't say that.
Well,
could you just answer the question then? Could you answer the question?
Well, why is it not happening? You just said we've got this fantastic relationship.
I didn't. I said we've not been at war for 120 years. Now,
So
can you answer the question?
Look our viewers in the eyes and tell them that their taxpayer money, £500 million of it, we've had a good return on that investment.
Look our viewers in the eyes and answer my question.
The answer to your question is that you're talking out of your bottom.
That's not an answer to my question.
It is actually.
What's your question?
You're just trying to say things. Do you think it would be easier to stop the boat with a good or a bad relationship with France?
I answered your question. You just said we have a great relationship with France.
I said we've not been at war for 120 years.
We have a good relationship with France.
No, we obviously haven't been at war for 120 years.
So if we have this fantastic relationship with France, why are we being taken for granted and having the complete mickey taken out of us by handing over vast sums of cash and getting absolutely sod all back?
Let me tell you why. Oh, sorry, Ben, you've gone.
No, I think the right answer, and Keir Starmer proposed this at one point, is that you make an agreement that you take a certain number of migrants and then you can actually be serious adults acknowledging that there is no world in which these people don't exist, in which they stop coming. That isn't an option in reality. So you agree an amount of people and then they can enforce it to stop it going over what's been mutually agreed.
Yeah, that won't be a pull factor at all. That won't get more people to come.
But you don't,
Michael.
But there's already, 40,000 or something coming in the last year, right? So, and that's not going to stop. I think your argument is so naive because we're only going to see more of this migration in the coming decades, and you need to get real about how much you can cope with.
It stops altogether. But this is what we've got to look forward to in the Labour Party. But still ahead, we're going to meet the man whose right-wing beliefs have cost him friendships and relationships. Is there a political gender gap? when it comes to dating. But next, we'll ask whether black women should be able to take the lead in Romeo and Juliet as an actress is targeted by racists on social media. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the princess and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of royalty protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah,
so times have changed drastically.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. I've just managed to pull Benjamin Butterworth off of Ben Leo. As always, cheers for your emails about tonight's topics. Regarding the Iran threat, SW says, not often I agree with Benjamin, but he's bang on the money with his concerns. And yes, Darren, giving them terrorist status would help. Now, on the French troops at Buckingham Palace, Peter says this is a reciprocal arrangement with the UK also having soldiers marching in the French equivalent. Yes, that is true.
Get our boys home.
Now it's time for our next debate. Who do we have next? I think I can guess.
C'est moi. Wow, Francesca Amawada Rivers. That is a name that you guys need to know because she is the next actress lined up to play Juliet in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet at the Duke's York Theatre. This should be a moment of celebration for Francesca, but unfortunately she's had to deal with racist trolls who are saying that Juliet should be played by a white actress, not a black actress. They've even gone beyond their trolling to start attacking her looks to say she looks trans. For me, this is just a trajectory of the entertainment industry where they're doing more blind colour casting and making sure that roles are open up to many people. I think it's all about merit. It should never be about colour. It should be who is the best woman or best man for the job. And it's been Francesca in this case. So,
Stephanie, I just wonder, And you might know the play Othello by Shakespeare. Othello is the main character, and he's a Moor.
No, is it new?
Sorry? No, it's not me. It's not me.
Yeah.
Othello is the main character.
Yeah.
Othello, for those of us who don't know, is one of the only black characters in Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Now, would you say it was OK for Othello to be played by a white actor?
Why not? If he is the best man for the job and he can bring his version of Othello alive on stage, then why not?
Then you're changing history. His version of
of the right.
That sounds like you want to change the essence of the play.
Well, there's been so many versions. We've stuck to tradition for so long. Why not do something refreshing?
Would
Why
you mind
not
if I
do
played
something...
Bob Marley in a Bob Marley
I don't think you would want to, though. I think there's limits.
I love Bob Marley.
There is limits, though. There is limits. And I think for this actress, there's been so many versions.
What are the limits?
I dare you. Hang on, then. Hang on. Let's get up another story that I thought was relevant to that conversation, because Wolf Hall, which is a BBC production on the Tudors, essentially, and it covered, the first series covered Henry VIII, and the BBC's Wolf Hall returns with diverse cast of Tudor courtiers. The conclusion of Dame Hilary Mantel's novels casts historically white characters with actors of different ethnicities. Now, a lot of people are saying about this particular story, well, hang on a minute, because this is changing, rewriting history. Do you think, actually, this is all to do with diversity, equity and inclusion, and less to do with talent, merit and historical accuracy?
No, I think it's about pushing the boundaries of creativity. Bridgerton is a massive success, and during that era there wasn't many black people, but people can accept it.
Henry VIII was real. The Tudor court was real.
And Romeo and Juliet wasn't real.
No, I know it wasn't real. I think this is different to the Romeo and Juliet proposition.
But my problem is, what is the problem when there is that inclusion of ethnic people in such storylines?
Because you are rewriting history.
Why are people getting offended by it? History's already happened.
Yeah, well, exactly.
We can't change history.
But you are teaching
we can
young
portray
kids
it the way we want to.
This is how Britain looked in that day and age, and it didn't.
Look, I think it's appalling that there wasn't more diversity among the women that Henry VIII beheaded. I think it's a disgrace. Look, I think the pertinent issue here is whether, if you have a character or a historical figure where the race is essential to their role in the story they're telling. So, you know, Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela, they're going to have to be black actors. I'm afraid you ain't going to play Bob Marley anytime soon. But in the case of Romeo and Juliet, I don't think that, you know, I've never thought, obviously, I've only ever seen white people playing the roles, but I've never thought about that as part of the story. In fact, given that it's a tale of people from two different worlds who aren't meant to be together, I actually think that lends itself very well to a racial
I just think it gives racists a chance just to be racist. Any excuse, you see a black person in a character that should be played by a white woman, it just gives trolls a chance just to express their views. I think it's the hatred behind it.
Is Albie racist? Disagreeing with it?
Had this been played by someone like Zendaya, for example,
Who's
or
that?
Zendaya or Halle Berry, you know, these very attractive, well-known black women up with Tom Holland, another Hollywood star. Do you think that the reaction would have been the same as this relatively unnknown actress who
we have a picture
looks quite different to what we imagine Juliet to
I think
look
they
like?
would have accepted it. They would have loved it because they're household names. But unfortunately for Francesca, this is her first West End play, and the fact that she's not as, you know, commercially attractive as people would like, that's Francesca right there. But it's, again, we have to think, why does society hate when people of colour get positions like
Here's
this?
the colour she is red.
Well, she looks red hot. But, yeah, you know, why does the hatred come? Why does the racism come?
I mean, so where's the racism been?
Online? It's online. It forced the production team to come out and say, we're not going to tolerate this bullying or this abuse of this woman just because she's just got this character.
All right, I'll let viewers decide. Get your emails in. What do you make at home? Still to come tonight, broadcaster Dominique Samuels will be telling us about taking magic mushrooms with Benjamin Butterworth. You need him to get through a conversation with him. But next, would you date a Tory, or is it a social taboo too far? You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers though pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge off those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain, across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who, at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the Red Wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
It's Saturday night, and this is the second hour of the Saturday Five. I'm Darren Grimes, along with Albion and Corner, Stephanie Tedgy, Ben Leo, and Benjamin Butterworth. Plenty more to come tonight, including the writer and broadcaster who's lost friendships and relationships due to his right-wing beliefs. Have you experienced such a thing? He can bond with Benjamin, who has also lost friendships and relationships, although it's nothing to do with his beliefs. It's 7 p.m, and this is the Saturday Five. Still to come tonight, the only thing that gets me through this show. Should magic mushrooms be available on the NHS? The broadcaster Dominique Samuels had the dubious honour of making a very show about this with Benjamin Butterworth. She'll be here to give us her take. Then we'll be answering your questions in Ask the Five. Send them through to gbviews@gbnews.com. This is your chance. First of all, though, it's your Saturday night news with the beautiful Tatiana Sanchez.
Darren, thank you. Your top stories this evening. Storm Kathleen has brought strong winds and a provisional highest temperature of the year so far, after a recording of 20.9 degrees Celsius in Suffolk. Dozens of flights, though, have been cancelled due to Storm Kathleen, with gusts of up to 70 miles per hour in Northern Ireland and the west of Britain. Over 140 flights have been called off so far. A yellow weather warning for wind is in effect until 10 o'clock tonight and covers Cornwall, much of Wales, parts of Lancashire and Cumbria, and up into central Scotland. Rail passengers have been facing fresh travel disruption today as train drivers have continued their strikes in their ongoing pay dispute. Members of ASLEV at 6 companies have walked out, leaving some areas with no services all day. Chiltern, TransPennine Express and Northern haven't been running any trains, and there's been a reduced service on Great Western, LNER and Heathrow Express. The torso found at a nature reserve in Salford belonged to a man aged older than 40. A murder investigation was launched by Greater Manchester Police after the body part was found wrapped in plastic at Kersal Wetlands. The victim's believed to have been dead for a number of days. DNA tests are ongoing to identify him. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has been detained by Dutch police during a demonstration in The Hague. Thunberg was put in a large bus by officers along with other protesters who tried to block a major highway into the administrative capital of the Netherlands. The 21-year-old activist was protesting against the Dutch government's fossil fuel subsidies. A women's rights rally in Edinburgh was disrupted by a transgender rights counter-protest today. The Let Women Speak rally came just 5 days after Scotland's new hate crime law came into effect. The legislation faces criticism over its impact on freedom of speech and concerns that it could be used to silence some views, including those who advocate for women-only spaces. And today marks the 50th anniversary of ABBA's famous win at the Eurovision Song Contest, which elevated the Swedish pop group to international fame. Their fans gathered today at London's Waterloo station to pay tribute by singing the song that won them the contest. ABBA won the European music competition with their smash hit Waterloo in 1974. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to the fabulous Saturday Five.
Oh, hey, the compliments. We need Tatiana in the background every night. Now, it's Saturday night and you're with the Saturday Five. I'm Darren Grimes and we've got another fun hour coming up. We're going to be asking if magic mushrooms are the answer to mental health issues, debating whether we should ban arms sales to Israel, and answering all of your questions in Ask the Five. First of all, though, there was a very interesting article in the Times this week suggesting that there is now a political divide between young men and young women, with women leaning left and the men tending towards the right. One of the authors says that she swipes left on dating apps quite literally, I assume, if people put Conservative in their bio and that her friend cried when she found out her new boyfriend voted for Boris Johnson of this parish. We'll be asking Albie and Benjamin what to do if a date starts crying. But now, let's meet our first guest. The writer and political commentator Jeff Heath-Taylor also contributed to the Times article, and he joins us now. Now, I assume you're not sort of outing yourself as a terrible date, right? This is just an ideological problem that you're highlighting. I assume you've got a healthy, budding love life.
I'm actually off the dating apps and not dating at all at the moment, focusing on other things. But I have, in the past, as I said in my article, Darren, in the past sort of 15 years as a right-leaning sort of person, I have had my fair share of cancellations and so forth from potential romantic interests, from friends, from acquaintances, because of my politics, and I've noticed, often come from women.
And how does that come to light? How do they come to know about your politics?
Well, you know, I've been involved in politics for 15 years. I worked on several campaigns. I worked on the Brexit campaign. I worked on
the Brexit campaign.
Boris's campaign. I know. So I worked on the Back Boris campaign, always in a voluntary capacity. But I can't help but talk about my politics quite early on, and also the fact that I write for publications about my politics means that people find out very quickly what my leanings are.
But, Jeff, don't you see it as you've dodged a bullet if a woman's like, she doesn't want to date you because of your politics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I find intellectual debate really stimulating, and I really enjoy it. I remember when I first moved to London, I lived with someone who, in fact, when I was living with this girl, a friend of mine, not a romantic interest, but during the Vote Leave campaign, and she was campaigning for Remain, and we lived together. And we had a third housemate who would often hear us arguing and think we were sort of having, you know, at each other's throats, and he'd come downstairs and we'd find us both with massive grins on our faces.
Welcome to Saturday.
Exactly. We've got a glass of wine in our hands. And, you know, she would be tearing down, I think, at one point I remember her flashing my posters down the loo as a joke.
Wow.
My Vote Leave posters. But we debated and we discussed, and it was healthy and positive. But I have had my fair share of unhealthy and...
So what's changed then? What do you think has changed? Because people of previous generations say that they haven't experienced such what they would describe as intolerance of different views. Do you think that we are becoming more tribal?
Totally. Yeah, we're definitely becoming more tribal. You know, and as I said in my article, you know, I try and make light of my politics sometimes, but a lot of people, especially on the left, can't take a joke. So I made a joke I mentioned in my article about you know, me joking with a guy I met at a party. This was just a friend's friend, and I was chatting to him, and I made a joke about my the fact that I like J.K. Rowling, and he cancelled me, and he told the birthday girl, and she asked me to leave the party. You know,
Albie, have you ever had any experiences like that as a Conservative?
No, I haven't, but I have met people who have said they'd never kissed a Tory, and then the situation has been quite different by the end of the evening. But what I would say is that I do host a podcast called the Never Kissed a Tory podcast, named after that Labour slogan, Never Kissed a Tory. And the left really do make a lot of hay out of this, but the right don't. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because it goes back to cancel culture and cancelling free speech. The left, the right, and especially small C Conservatives like me who believe in, you know, individual liberty, freedom of speech and so forth. I'm a great believer in discussion and debate, whereas I think the left, and it's interesting that we're seeing this gender divide, I think the left can often emotionalise things more. And so they'll and maybe that's a girl thing, maybe it's just a left thing, but they see my views as an attack on them personally. So I've noticed a lot of people on the left, when I share my views, see me as attacking them rather than attacking their views, which is why they cancel me rather than discuss and debate with me.
All right, we spoke earlier about left-wing jokes. Let's bring one in. What do you make of all of that, then?
Look, first of all, the stock image of a person wearing Never Kissed a Tory T-shirt is a 19-year-old me, which gets reprinted every single conference season in the papers.
And can you confirm you've never kissed a Tory?
My first kiss was a Tory, in fact. I started as that means...
But look,
I'm afraid I think this is self-indulgent, grandiose nonsense.
Yeah.
I don't think the reason you can't get a date is because you're right-wing. I think it's because you are thrusting your views on people at the first opportunity.
It could be that. It could be that.
So in your article, you talk about how you just met someone and immediately started telling them what your views were. When you walked in here, the first thing you said was, hello, I'm a small C Conservative. I couldn't care less, love. You did.
You were putting words in my mouth.
I think what's weird is that you seem to think that your views are so important that people must be informed of them at first.
That's totally unfair. Firstly, I didn't say I struggled to get dates.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very possible for me to get a date, but I'm not dating at the moment, like I said. But no, what I think is interesting with what you've just said is, you know, I came into the room and someone said you're a Tory, and I said actually I don't identify as a Tory, I identify as a small C Conservative, and that's important. That's an important
in your
thing
story,
to note, because I didn't call myself a Tory in my article either. I have traditionally supported.
But I wasn't talking about whether you were a Tory or not. I'm talking about the fact, and it would go if wouldn't necessarily to be right-wing or Tory or anything, that you walk into a room in these dates or in this party that you describe in the Times article and immediately start declaring which side of the fence you are.
I didn't.
And I think that is what is the problem.
No, you're right. And I don't go in and introduce myself with my politics. I was limited, sadly, to only 800 words.
I'm afraid going up to someone and going, hello, I think J.K. Rowling is right, is probably quite off-putting, just because it's quite self-indulgent.
Yeah, it is. I can give you the broader context. The broader context was this particular gentleman who was engaged to a man, a vicar, was telling me how they keep their sexuality secret from the vicar's congregation. So he was telling me that they're engaged, but they're not sharing the fact they're engaged with his congregation, and the hypocrisy of that made me cross, because I thought, by all means, be engaged, but don't hide it from a congregation when you're supposed to be preaching the truth from the pulpit. So because of that, I was annoyed because of the hypocrisy, the perceived hypocrisy of this situation, which is why I then started probing into his politics.
Well, as fascinating as that is, do you not just think that the problem is that you put your politics before the chance to get to know somebody, that you want to frame it in that way?
Well, hang on, can I frame it in a different way? Because actually I would say that cut to the chase, right? If you tell someone, look, you're probably going to have a problem with my politics, so I'm going to be upfront with you and tell you from the off that this is me, this is what I'm about, and if you don't like it, well, leave
you can lump it. But Jeff, don't you think it would be better for you to date a woman who is right-wing? It just makes things easier. If you, like, for instance, if you want children, if you want to get married, all these things will be topics that come up. You know, if you're dating a left-wing woman, she's going to have a set of values that is not going to be in line with your values.
Well, I did say again in my article that whilst I like intelligent discussion and debate, common values is important. Now, I don't know if I'm going to date again anytime soon, but it is important to note that, yes, you do need shared values. But I'll give the example of my old housemate who I lived with in Battersea, who had different views to me, but we actually had the same values. The fundamental core values were the same. She expressed it in different ways. She was a Remainer, I was a Brexiteer. You know, that's not a make or... At one point for me, that was make or break. I thought I couldn't perceive dating anyone who didn't believe in British sovereignty over being governed by the European Union. But the point is...
so you wouldn't have dated someone that wasn't Brexit?
10 years ago, probably not, but...
So aren't you guilty of the very thing you're accusing others of?
Oh, I was, but that was 10 years ago, or 8 years ago. You know, I've gone through massive growth in the last 8 years in lots of different ways. You know, my dating life has changed, my romantic... my dynamic with prospective
let's go
partners
back to Benjamin then. So why do you think the left are so intolerant, and why are you the poster boy of never kissing a Tory, for example? Are you not?
When you have kissed a Tory, can I just say? Your first ever kiss was a Tory.
Beggars can't be choosers.
A hypocrite like Keir Starmer.
For me, my friendship circle involves a massive variety of people with different views, which I think is actually quite unusual. So there's some truth in it that people tend to silo themselves. But I don't think that's unique just to politics. I think people do that with other big cultural commonalities, like race, for example. You know, that tends to be people mix among their own overwhelmingly. I don't think that... Well, look, it depends on what the view is. You know, if you're going up to someone and saying, oh, you know, I don't believe in trans people's human rights, then I can see why someone would think, actually, that feels like an affront to the way I see the world. And I think that's fine. But I think the idea that left-wing people uniquely have a problem with dating someone of a different politics is just not true. And I think the very fact that you put your politics first in these scenarios, as you described, illustrates that.
I think that's partly true. But firstly, I don't put my politics first. But secondly, have you ever seen a will not date a socialist on a dating app? Have you ever seen that before?
No, I've never seen it. Whereas I won't. Never take all my money on dating apps all the time. I see it all the time. And actually, I agree with what you said about getting your politics out there, you know, straight off the bat.
Yeah.
One of the things that I actually say to people when I'm on dating apps, not the same one as William Wragg, by the way, is that I will be like, oh, by the way, I'm a Tory, because it's quite clear if you search my name in Google what comes up. So you might as well just get it off your chest straight away. But actually, most of the time, it's not resulted in the conversation not continuing.
So you're in a fortunate position because you're a lefty. Your views fit the media and political culture in this country.
I mean, I have a problem that I did an interview on Good Morning Britain about saying there are 100 genders that's been watched 50 million times. And so on a number of times I've gone on dates and that's the very first thing they mention. So they already know all my politics. But look, I just think that, you know, maybe take responsibility for yourself. Don't make these excuses. I have honestly never gone on a date and told someone that I vote Labour. It just wouldn't occur to me. That particular questions might naturally crop up, but telling them how I vote just would not be a big deal.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Jeff Heath-Taylor there. I want to know what you think at home, though. Do you think actually society is becoming more intolerant of political views? Can you date someone with the opposite politics to you? Still to come tonight, though, we'll answer your questions in Ask the Five. And I'll be going head-to-head with my old pal, Albie Amankona, in our Saturday Scrap. Next up, though, it's 5 quick-hit topics in Bunch of 5. Dominic Samuels is here talking about magic mushrooms with Benjamin Butterworth. And Ben Leo will tell us about the football mascot who got sacked for flirting with fans. Filthy beast. Oh, we're tackling the big issues as usual. You're with the Saturday 5 live on GB News.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
The real danger to our democracy, of course, always was China. And we learn overnight. We'd heard in August last year that the Electoral Commission's website had been compromised, their database had been compromised. And we learn overnight that, yes, actually, the Chinese Communist Party now have access to 40 million voters in this country and their data. Well, to respond to this in the House of Commons earlier, we heard from the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden.
I can confirm today that Chinese state-affiliated actors were responsible for 2 malicious cyber campaigns targeting both our democratic institutions and parliamentarians. That is why the United Kingdom has today sanctioned 2 individuals and 1 entity associated with the Chinese state-affiliated APT31 group for involvement in malicious cyber activity targeting officials, government entities, and parliamentarians around the world.
I don't know how tough that sounds to you in terms of a response, but one Member of Parliament, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, was, shall we say, less than impressed.
Whilst I welcome these 2 sanctions from the government, it is a little bit, this statement, like an elephant giving birth to a mouse. The reality is that in those 3 years, the Chinese have trashed the Sino-British agreement. They have been committing murder and slave labour and genocide in Xinjiang. We have had churches broken and, in Hong Kong, false court cases against Jimmy Lai.
Great quote, elephant giving birth to a mouse. I rather like that. Sir Ian's here. I'll ask him about where that came from in a moment. But it's all going to be OK. It's all going to be absolutely fine.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. As always, thank you very much for your emails about tonight's topics. Vivian has written in. Good evening, Vivian. She says, I would definitely not date a man with socialist views. They are all badly educated, thick as planks, bad manners and boring to be with. Probably no money either. Well, actually, Vivian, I think you'll find that they do have money. A lot of them have middle-class guilt.
Has Vivian just described Benjamin?
I've got money. Educated quite well.
Vivian knows what she wants.
And Lena said, I'm a young Conservative. Good evening, Lena. And honestly, she says, I wouldn't say no to a Labour-supporting man because, shock horror, I focus more on character and friendship. Plus, it'd be a great chance to reenact Prime Minister's questions at home.
Yo, that sounds fun.
Is that your think, Lena? It's time for Bunch of Five. Who's going to kick us off on our topics? 5 topics. Quick round. Here we go.
Well, I am. There was a really interesting story in the Daily Telegraph about the Labour MP Charlotte Nichols, who has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And she is calling for the ingredient in magic mushrooms to be made prescribed on the NHS. Now, last year, or a year and a half ago now, I did a programme on Channel 4 with Dominique Samuels, formerly of This Parish, where we hero-dosed magic mushrooms. So I had 10 grams of magic mushrooms and then had a 9-hour trip, as they call it. Now, I'd never done anything like that before, but it had an incredibly positive effect on my mental health. And I think we're joined by Dominique this evening. Dominique, you, I think, had a huge consequence after that to how you saw the world. Can you tell us how it changed your perception of life?
Yeah, no, I think huge consequence is a bit of an understatement. It fundamentally changed my whole outlook on everything. And it's been really quite a journey, but I definitely think that magic mushrooms, or, psilocybin as really they should be called, should be available for medicinal use on the NHS. So many studies demonstrate that they help with anxiety and depression. Microdosing is more popular than ever. And really just if we look at a lot of indigenous cultures where things like psilocybin and other plant-based medicines are used ceremonially, and they have a profound effect on people's lives. And I think if more people were open to the profound benefit that plant medicine has, there would be less fighting and division in the world. And really, that's what it made me understand, that a lot of the division that plagues discourse and plagues the world is ultimately futile, because really the experience made me see that we are ultimately all connected and we're all one. And the political space was just completely against that, and that's sort of why I had to depart.
Millions of people take prescription drugs to deal with things like depression and anxiety. And, that will work for some people, it will help them out. But why do you think that this, which grows in the ground, which is natural, which has evolved with humans over millions of years, why do you think politics in this country just looks at that and calls it a drug and says we shouldn't consider the benefits?
Well, you probably know already that I'm a bit predisposed to conspiracy theories, and I just believe that the reason why this sort of thing is looked down upon and sort of shoved away is precisely because it has more benefit than the toxic pharmaceuticals that shove down people's throats. Because really, I believe that, Big Pharma actually benefits from keeping people sick and keeping people mentally ill. And what's different about psilocybin is that you cannot actually get addicted to it in the way that you can get addicted to things like prescription drugs alcohol, other drugs that people use for like just partying and things like that. So it's very, very different. And I think it's, you know, not a coincidence that it's sort of looked as this crazy drug when really it's supposed to be used to heal people and to help people.
But Dominique, how does it actually heal people? Like, what is the medical research into it? Because that's what most people would want to know, the science behind it. And in a way, is it really helping people deal with their problems, or is it just going to be a temporary high or a mini fix?
Well, I think it's a bit different, because what it actually allows you to do is experience a lot of the feelings and a lot of the emotions that we actually keep trapped within us. Probably from a very young age, I think by age 7, we've already developed quite cemented views of the world based upon trauma that we've experienced or just experiences that we've had. And what psilocybin actually does is it actually brings that up to the surface and allows it to be processed in those sorts of ceremonies. But when it's sort of like microdosing, there are no psychedelic effects in terms of visuals. It just basically calms you down. People report feeling way more chill, way more confident, and way more connected with themselves, because at our source, we are loving, open, confident human beings.
Yeah, but Dominique, a lot of viewers at home will be saying, well, hang on a minute, because you experienced a agreement as a consequence of smoking this magic... Oh, is that how you do it? You
drink it.
Drinking magic mushrooms. You said you, as a consequence, agreed with Benjamin Butterworth. So a lot of people, a lot of viewers at home will be saying this stuff is clearly, it has really serious side effects.
Well, no, it had very serious side effects indeed. But I think with Benjamin, I mean, it hasn't like completely transformed every single view of mine. But I think what it did is just remind me that at our core, we are all human, having this experience on Earth, and that we're all connected. And really, no matter what political belief you have, really, we need to remember that, because politics and just life in general keeps us so disconnected from one another. And I think, again, if more people did some microdosing, we'd be a lot happier, to be honest.
Dominique, hey, it's Ben. I hope you're well. I haven't seen you in a while. So I understand you're saying that you've kind of seen through the veil of the theatre of politics and right-wing, left-wing, etc. However, is there still a place for that? I mean, we live in a physical existence. Is there still a place for that discourse?
I think there's definitely a place for political discourse, and I think that, yeah, as human beings, there is a place for politics. It's obviously here for a reason. But I think where people get lost is they identify themselves too much with a political identity without realising that you're actually beyond all of that. And when you attach your identity so much to a worldview, it creates an echo chamber, and you can become ignorant to your own ignorance. And that is the left. Right, equally, in my opinion.
Okay, Dominique Samuels, thank you very much. You can go enjoy your evening in whatever way you fancy. And we're going to move on.
You know, when I did the 10 grams of magic mushrooms, the idea is that you achieve ego death. But anyway, it turned out that there was no amount of magic mushrooms that could kill my ego off.
All right.
We need to up the dose.
So my bunch of 5 story is about the solar eclipse, which is happening next week. I don't know if anyone is aware that there's a solar eclipse which is happening. But I've always thought that solar eclipses are actually quite overrated. It just feels, unless it's a total eclipse where it's actually dark, it just feels like it's a different time of the day at the time of the day that you're in. It just feels a bit darker at midday than it normally does. So I just think, who cares?
What's the difference between a solar eclipse and the one that's happening in a few days in America?
Don't ask me that question. I'm not a physicist.
Well, look, all I know...
I'm just saying it's all overrated.
Bonnie Tyler's going to be screaming at the telly right now. She'll be livid.
Sorry, Bonnie. It's true. It's true. It's just dark a bit earlier for a few minutes.
I just think it's just another facet of nature which is interesting. You know, it's not something we see every day, so it's good to be highlighted and to value it.
It reminds me of that Jaffa Cakes advert, full moon, half moon. So
Yeah,
where she eats Anyway, on that really intellectual note, who's next?
Is it me?
I think so.
Sorry. My bunch of 5 is Jude, the mascot from QPR, Queen's Park Rangers. Apparently, this guy's been dressing as Jude the cat, is a black cat in a QPR kit, for about 20 years. It's been the same bloke in there. However, he's lost all his lives because QPR have sacked him for being a bit of a perv with the fans. Our in-house sports reporter, Ada McGee, really nice bloke, he shared this picture of yesteryear of Jude the mascot taking the hand of his ex-missus and giving her I thought was a gentlemanly kiss on the hand. Yeah, Aidan reckons that this is, slightly over the top. And Jude at QPR at Loftus Road, he's been wiggling his bum, getting a bit too close with female fans. So, yes, QPR have given him the sack. And I just think it's a bit...
Steph, do you find it uncomfortable?
I just think he's probably managed to get away with doing X-rated behaviour because he's under this big whatever he's under this cat thing.
X-rated? What was he doing?
Well, you know, if he's like wiggling his bum and whatever, you just don't see it. For him, you know what? For him to get sacked, he must have done something which crossed the borderline.
He's been sacked for.
Yeah. What, for wiggling his bum?
Just going in the crowd, hugging people, wiggling his bum.
Had people complained about him?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he must have done something a bit too extreme.
Well, you should be careful about football mascots because, of course, the monkey in Hartlepool ran for mayor and then won twice. So maybe the cat can be mayor of Queen's Park.
Steph, what have you got for us?
Well, it seems like Sacha Baron Cohen has been cancelled by his wife, Isla Fisher, who announced their divorce yesterday. I do think, talk about kicking a man when he's down, because he's had this whole drama with Rebel Wilson, who in her memoir said that, you know, he practically sexually harassed her, which he's denied. But I think the timing of her announcement is quite cruel because he's already got a lot of heat at the moment due to this memoir. And now she's saying they divorced last year very quietly. But I think she's just trying to save her own skin with this, to be honest.
Just to remind viewers at home of who he is. Ali G,
Ali G, Borat, he's a comedian. So she announced it with them wearing these... Yes, Isla Fisher. She announced it with them wearing these tennis outfits, and she said, you know, having played a match lasting over 20 years, we are now finally putting our rackets down. But I just think, you know what, you could have saved this announcement once the heat had died off him now, because it just makes him more relevant again.
You know, if they actually got divorced last year, the fact that she's chosen to say that now, I think is to distract from the allegations, the complaints that Rebel Wilson makes in her memoir.
I was thinking that, but then I was thinking, no, actually, she just wants to save her own skin and make sure that her career is still intact, to say, actually, I'm not with him anymore, so please don't put us together anymore.
Who's your favourite Sacha Baron Cohen character?
It's got to be Ali G. The original. I was going to do an impression, but
Go
I'm
on.
going to. No, absolutely
Come
on. I couldn't. No, it's not.
Do you think he could do Ali G today?
No, I don't think incidentally he could. I think he'd be called racist, actually.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, because Ali G was hilarious.
When was Ali G? How many years ago?
Gosh, that must have
10, 15 years ago?
More like 20.
Late 90s, early 2000s, I think.
Yeah.
Borat as well. Borat was very good.
I loved Borat.
Very nice. How much?
Well, that's when Neil cancelled. He won't be back next week. And, yes, right, OK, next up then, I want to talk about the Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, that is. And, well, actually, no, we're going straight to a break, apparently. All right, now, thank you for that interlude. Now, we're going to talk about the Daily Telegraph article that reports that True Blue Conservatives are not being selected as candidates by the Conservative Party. So that's you lot at home who might agree with Brexit, who might have policies that agree with me over Benjamin Butterworth. You wouldn't be selected by the Conservative Party because you're a true blue Tory.
Yeah.
Speaking to a man who's not a true blue Tory, not Benjamin Butterworth, Albion, well, he's certainly not a true blue Tory. Albion Kona.
He's a Lib Dem in disguise.
Oh, Lib Dem in disguise. Here we go. Here we go.
Would they select Ben Leo?
I'm sure if Ben Leo put himself forward to be on the candidates list, Ben would get onto the candidates list. Then it's up to the associations who they select as their candidates. And actually, having gone through the candidates process and know people that have been through the candidates process, I can tell you there are people that you would consider to be true blue Tories that are on the candidates list. I think the issue in this Telegraph article, which is being highlighted, is they're not being selected in seats by local associations because there is an accusation that allegedly CCHQ is pushing forward certain candidates. And I think that is what people are concerned of.
The Conservative Party is rotten to the core with Liberal Democrats like Albie, with lefty, left of centre, even, I'd argue, far
What's a left of centre view that I have, Ben?
Well, you think women can have penises?
No, I don't think that. I think out of politeness,
Well,
you
there
should
we
call
go.
trans women her and she.
Well, there you go. There's an
That's
example.
not left-wing.
And that's why the
That's not
Conservatives.
left-wing.
That's why the Conservatives, by the way, are facing.
That's the law since
electoral
2004.
wipeout. That's why the Conservatives are facing electoral
It's
wipeout.
the law since 2004.
You think
Well, you go off on a
Rishi
tangent.
Sunak's Conservative?
But I mean, look, I think you're nothing more than a right-wing Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
You know, the thing is, the problem with party politics is that people that join a political party are always going to be more right-wing or more left-wing than the vast majority of the country is. And so I actually think it's a really good idea when central parties, be it Labour or Tory central parties, try and get candidates that actually reflect the kind of generally moderate views that the country has.
But what's been said, though, Steph, is that candidates report, it's these candidates who've applied for the Conservative Party, they say that the selection process is biased against Brexit supporters and focused excessively on diversity promotion, sidelining discussions on Conservative principles.
Well, maybe it's time for a rebrand, and maybe that's what the party understands.
So more diversity.
More diversity. Maybe that's what works, and maybe that's what works in this day and age.
Can I just point out?
Well, let's let Albie come in on that.
That isn't true. I mean, look, I've been through the candidates process. At no point do they talk about wanting, you know, diversity and inclusion. It really is quite a rigorous process in order to get onto the candidates list. And I don't think diversity came up once in the entire process from what I can remember.
But don't you think it should?
Well, I think the Conservative Party...
As a party which has been...
I think the Conservative Party has shown that without all of that, we can produce good, diverse, Conservative candidates through a meritocratic system. We look at people who've risen up the party, like James Cleverly, Kemi Badenoch, even the person you love. Exactly. Without all of this stuff, so we don't need to be doing all of it to get these results.
There is an element of diversity, equity and inclusion that's allowing...
I don't know what's going on at CCHQ, but I know people who have stood, proper Conservatives with Conservative values, and I know for a fact that the people selecting candidates have totally omitted them for complete wets. And that's why the Conservative Party are facing the problem they face at the moment. Electoral wipeout, because they don't know who they are, they're absolutely riddled to the core with non-Conservative people, and they don't care about the kind of quality Conservative candidates that they should be getting in seats.
But Benjamin, the same argument could be put against the Labour Party, could it not? Because a lot of the left in that particular party are saying that Sir Keir Starmer is trying to deselect people like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should the likes of Diane Abbott, should the likes of Jeremy Corbyn be allowed in a Labour Party?
No.
That's a large tent.
No, absolutely not. Diane Abbott should not get the whip back. Jeremy Corbyn should never be anywhere near the Labour Party.
Why? Because of their views?
I don't want anybody who is on the hard left to be selected. I want the central control that gets quality, moderate people that look like the country. But look, I would just point out...
That's impossible, though.
No, because I've got loads of friends that have been selected.
Who have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own opinions. That's just trying to stream.
But it's your responsibility to reflect the country, and people that join political parties are weird. They're going to be more extreme than the centre. Look, I'd just point out that it's a bit rich to complain about central party controlling candidates. When Boris Johnson was Tory leader, he said, if you don't sign up to my particular Brexit deal, then you can never be a Tory candidate.
Well, yeah,
now, that was the most extreme vetting.
Most constituencies in the country had voted for Brexit. That's why.
Right, but you can't have it both ways. He said, unless you sign up to my Brexit deal, not just Brexit, then you can't be a Tory candidate. That was incredibly controlling.
I think it was a very good thing. Anyway, still ahead, we're talking about your questions in Ask the Five. But next, I'm going to take Albie to task on whether we should ban arms sales to Israel in the Saturday scrap. You're with the Saturday Five live on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers, though, pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge off those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday 5. Your emails are coming in thick and fast regarding the discussion on the theatre and who can play which role. Tex says, I've recently seen a black actress play Dorothy on stage in The Wizard of Oz. It's all about the talent and ability.
Thank you.
John is unimpressed with Benjamin's take on magic mushrooms and says, is this clown doing mushrooms? Unbelievable. Regarding the sacked football mascot, Neil says, I was a mascot for 20 years and the amount of times I got groped by women is unreal. It's a tough activity and in no way can you get involved in X-rated activity. Too tiring, too sweaty, and generally you can't see.
Oh, OK.
Oh, well, that's a fair argument. Now, though, it's time for tonight's main event as I lock horns with Albion and Corner in the Saturday Scrap. Now, more than 600 lawyers, academics and retired judges this week wrote to the Prime Minister warning that the UK government is breaching international law, we hear that every week, by continuing to arm Israel. But former Prime Minister Boris Johnson says in the Daily Mail that banning arms sales to Israel would be insane. So, to the surprise of no one, Albion and Corner backs it. Albi? I'm confident you were on the totally wrong side on this one, so I'm going to let you kick us off.
Of course you are, Darren, because you don't have one single good argument in you for this. It is time to end arms sales to Israel. Now, I have been a proud supporter of Israel and their right to defend themselves after the awful terrorist attacks of Hamas on October the 7th. In fact, it's been almost 6 months to that day as we sit here in the studio speaking about this tonight. But in that time, we've seen tens of thousands of innocent Palestinian civilians be killed by IDF strikes. And earlier on this week, I think it was in fact last Sunday, we saw 3 British aid workers killed in a targeted strike during the conflict. 3 separate trucks were struck by 3 separate weapons in a targeted strike against 3 trucks, which were aid trucks, but they thought they were Hamas trucks. Now, if Israel's intel is so poor that they are striking aid trucks carrying British workers, we cannot be supplying arms to an army which is not operating in the correct and proper way, whether or not they are breaking international law. It could have been British weapons that killed those British people.
Now, Albie, what I would say to that, though, is that David Cameron, when he was Prime Minister, we got involved in Libya. We intervened in Libya. Now, what happened in Libya was that 2 or 3 paramedics were killed whilst trying to heal people, to protect them from egregious harm and all the rest of it, because Libya was so unstable, and they were killed whilst doing that in a friendly fire incident. Now, nobody then suggested that arms embargoes should be put on the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, because we accepted that in the theatre of war, horrible, tragic mistakes happen, for which Israel has apologised and actually sacked those responsible for that egregious, awful error. I think Israel is facing a civilizational moment. I think it's highlighted in what Benjamin said earlier about Iran and the threat Iran pose to our country. Now, that is even greater in the state of Israel. Iran are using their proxies throughout the Middle East to actually attack and wipe Israel off the map.
But I
think we would be doing a great disservice to Western civilization if we allow a country that, since its inception, since it was created 75 years ago, has actually been bombarded, threatened, pilloried at every twist and turn. We, I think, would actually be saying goodbye to Western civilization if we allow Israel to be wiped off the map.
I think you're being a bit overdramatic when you say we would be saying goodbye to Western civilization if we essentially stop arming Israel. Israel will be fine without our arms. It's actually a relatively small amount of arms that we give to Israel, but it is about the message that it sends the international community.
So should America do it as well?
Are not. Yes, I do actually think the West.
So no one should.
I think the West.
No one should arm
I think
Israel.
the West as a whole should stop licensing weapons to Israel, because the way they are prescribing
to Israel as a
the way they are prescribing this war in Israel and Gaza is totally unacceptable.
To Israel as a consequence?
And
You've said all of that.
No,
we haven't got very long.
And what I'm
You've said all of
saying
that.
is, how
You're
many
repeating yourself.
acts of violence do you say until you say it is enough? It is enough. We cannot support this sort of violent action when British aid workers are being killed and tens of thousands No, Darren, don't put words in my mouth. I do not support Israel killing thousands of children in Palestine, even if I want the state of Israel to exist.
Actually,
they are prescribing this war in an awful way.
Benjamin, what I would say is that as far the United Nations and other experts in the area have said that as far as urban warfare is concerned, the toll, and this is bearing in mind that Hamas are using the population as human shields, the death toll has actually, for urban warfare, been tremendously low when you compare it to other large-scale, similar-scale wars around the world.
Yeah, I mean, compare it with what we did to Germany, of course. You know, we don't have a problem with that. But, you know, look, first of all, you've had your point. First of all, I don't accept the numbers that come out of Gaza for a split second.
Why not?
There's no other terrorist organisation where we take them at their word. Seemingly, they can have an attack and then they have an exact number the next day. If they're that good at numbers, they should be accountants, not terrorists.
No one's died in Gaza.
But the truth is, and we talked about Iran earlier, which is funding and arming Gaza and Hamas, is that if we stopped supporting arms to Israel, they wouldn't stop funding the terrorists, and you would let the terrorists win. When people talk about genocide, which this is not, the fact is that it is in the charter of Hamas to have a genocide of the Jewish people and of the Israeli state. They are the ones supporting genocide.
Sorry, we've run out of time in that. I'm so sorry.
OK.
Right. I'll let you decide at home. Email us. Let us know what you thought. Still ahead, though, we finally shut our mouths, you'll be delighted to know, albeit only briefly. And you wonderful viewers, take back control in Ask the Five. You're with the Saturday Five live on GB News.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
One more story in. Milton Keynes, absolute chaos in the city. 300-odd youths arrested or at least involved in a
stampede.
A stampede. Yeah, what's been going on?
A stampede through the...
there we are.
This is the video. So this is a stampede through a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. I think, Amy, you live there, don't you? You live nearby.
For those on radio, we can see literally hundreds, scores of
I think
kids.
there are about 300 kids.
Are they in school uniform?
Yeah, quite a few.
This is as they've broken up from school, presumably.
Security tried to intervene. They've been accused of being heavy-handed. But I think this speaks to the fact that the landscape of youth services has just been decimated and there's literally nothing for kids.
So hang on, whoa. You think that this has happened because social services have been diluted?
Youth services.
This is because there's no police around, there's no oversight, there's no deterrent, and 300 kids think that they can run through a shopping centre, frightening shoppers out of their lives.
Going to a shopping
Amy,
centre.
sorry, my kids would not be behaving like that because there's no ping pong available at the local
Aren't your kids like
youth
age
centre.
4 and 5? These are teenagers, and our teenagers are headed into a world where there are no leisure services.
It's got nothing to do with crime. If we up the ante
everything
on basketball, it's not going to stop kids being stabbed on the street.
What creates antisocial behaviour is having nothing to do.
It's lack of discipline in the home, lack of discipline in the home, and lack of policing on the streets, and a judiciary and a penal system that is utterly liberal.
You're going right to the end of the line. What about the preventative measures?
What about the people that these people affect by running through a shopping centre and stampeding? When there's mothers with kids in prams frightened out of their lives, and we're worried about the social services
I'm
aspect
talking about
that's perhaps
carrot.
led to
You're
it.
talking about stick, right?
Yeah. So how long does your solution take to resolve it? Mine takes about 30 seconds. More police, bang them up. Yours...
Russell, should parents be fined?
More police, bang them up.
Absolutely, and the kids should be taken to task.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to the Saturday Five. It's time now for Ask the Five. No topics are off limits, and you've been filling up our mailbox at gbviews@gbnews.com. Lisa has written in, the trepidation is here. Hi, Stephanie, great to see you on the show. It's 50 years since the world's greatest ever band, ABBA, won the Eurovision Song Contest. Oh, what's your favourite ABBA song?
Well, I am the ultimate ABBA fan, and my favourite song is actually One of Us. It's the ultimate breakup song, and it was just such a sad ending when the group were breaking apart. So One of Us...
Can we get a line?
One of us is crying, one of us is...
Well, that's really good.
Well done, Steph.
Thank you.
Good job.
I mean, I absolutely love ABBA. I was at the opening night of ABBA Voyage, which was the first time in 42 years that all 4 members of ABBA worked together.
Guy.
And the King and Queen of Sweden walked past me in the entrance. And as I saw the Queen of Sweden, I said, a real-life dancing queen.
Oh, I like that.
For goodness sake.
Did she respond? She beheaded me.
All right, the next one. Question from Carolyn. She starts and she says, Hi, Benjamin. Love your articles. Oh. And no, Darren, it's not his mum. Who's writing
My mum can't read.
etc. Do you like reading? Oh, Karl Marx. Whose books?
I'm reading Danny Wallace at the moment. I absolutely love Danny Wallace, who writes for GQ. He writes lots of men's stuff. Do you know what? I was going to say I don't read that much intellectual stuff. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But I do. One thing I'd make a point of is I think it's really important to read newspapers that don't tell you what you already think and to get stories from different perspectives. I think as a journalist and as a person, that's really important.
Right. I think self-help books are quite good. Do you guys read self-help books?
Yeah. Clearly not.
I think this is what we need as a 5, self-help books.
What do you read, Steph?
I read a lot of motivational stuff.
Do you like Abraham Hicks? Have you read that stuff?
Oh, yes, I have. And I listen to her stuff as well.
One of my faves.
Oh,
Right.
good.
A question from Jason. He says, Hi, Five. You're on good form tonight. Thank you very much, Jason. If there was one thing in life which you could ban, what would it be, Benjamin Butterworth?
I was going to say Ben Leo. There's one thing I could ban.
what would I ban? Arms.
Do you know what I would ban? Those Lime bikes. The ones where you ride it, and then they just drop them in the middle of the pavement.
I know what I would ban. Raisins.
Raisins?
Raisins are devil's spawn.
Do you know what
I can't stand them.
People playing music on public transport.
Without headphones, yes.
Do you know what I would ban? People coughing on public transport and not covering their mouth. That is one of my pet peeves.
I would ban parents shouting at their kids. You don't need to shout at your kids. You can communicate with them in a proper manner. And actually doing that just shows that you are not a very good parent.
You've never shouted at your kids, Ben?
No.
You namby-pamby liberal.
No, but you can communicate in a way. If you're shouting at your kids,
Has your nanny
you're
ever
just
shouted at your
showing
kids?
that you can't control. You're showing that you can't control your. In actual fact, me and my wife have never shouted at each other. We've never had a raised voice in 14 years.
God.
Wow. Have you ever
Secret to
shouted?
happy...
Have you got kids there?
No kids, but I do shout a lot.
Right, on that bombshell, thank you very much to our guests tonight. Of course, the brilliant Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks to most of our wonderful viewers, especially Leslie, who said, I just wanted to say how much I love and enjoy your banter. It feels like a Saturday night out with my girlfriends. Even Benjamin is entertaining. Next up, well, I never. It's the rarely seen Ben Leo presenting the Saturday Night Showdown. What have you got for us, Ben?
Lots going on. William Wragg, lots of fun and frolics. Yeah, it's going to be fun. 3 panellists, comedy. Yeah, join me. Few minutes.
Don't miss it, folks. We'll see you here again next week.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. Storm Kathleen continues to bring some very windy conditions across the UK through Saturday evening and into Sunday. Currently situated out towards the northwest of the UK, slowly pushing its way northwards through this evening and into the start of Sunday, but continuing to bring some very strong winds, particularly across western parts of the UK. Still seeing gusts up in the sort of 50s or 60s overnight, and particularly in northwest Scotland, and plenty of heavy showers too. This could lead to some localised flooding, particularly across southwestern parts of the UK. Turning a little drier and staying mild overnight, temperatures around the high single figures, perhaps even low double figures across the south, but it will be briefly a drier start for many of us on Sunday. Further showers though pushing their way north and eastwards as we go through Sunday morning. Again, these could be heavy in places, perhaps some hail and thunder mixed in too, and could cause some localised flooding across southwestern parts. Southeast England definitely holding on to the best of the sunshine, but with a strong southwesterly breeze across the whole of the UK, it will take the edge of those temperatures, but despite being 16 or 17 degrees. Monday will start dry across Northern Ireland and much of Scotland, but it will turn increasingly cloudy as we head through the morning. Another area of low pressure moving in from the southwest, turning particularly heavy, that rain across western parts of England and into Northern Ireland later. Further unsettled weather through the first part of next week, with temperatures generally a little bit above average, but there are some hints of something a little bit drier later in the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome.